Hello, my precious friends. I really hope that you are doing great. Welcome to our today's class. It's our fourth lesson on the third topic of Form 3 work, which is called Newton's Laws of Motion. As it is our norm, let me start by giving you the quote of the day, which states that small steps in the right direction can turn out to be the biggest step in your life. We shall discuss that quote at the end of our class today. So today we are looking at further examples involving the impulse of the force and of course the change in momentum. So our first example reads that a truck of mass 2000 kilogram starts from rest on a horizontal rails. Find the speed 3 seconds after starting if the tractive force by the engine is 1000 newtons. So as usual, we just identify the quantities that you have been provided by the question. So we are told that a truck of mass 2000 kilograms, so we note a mass of 2000 kilograms starts from rest. That means that the initial velocity is 0, because from rest means that the body is stationary or not moving, and therefore if it is starting from rest, it means the initial or the starting velocity of such a body must be 0 meters per second on horizontal rails. Then find the speed. So of course the speed in this case, they are talking of the final velocity, because you have been given the initial velocity, which is the body starting from rest. So the final velocity v is question mark. Find the speed 3 seconds, that is time. Time for that particular journey is 3 seconds after starting if the tractive force by the engine is 1000 newton. So that is F is 1000 newton. So if we look at these particular values that we have been provided, we have M, we have U, we have T, F, and V. So of course we can use two approaches to solve for the value of V. That is, we can use the relationship between the impulse and change in momentum. Alternatively, you can just use the formula that we derived from the Newton's second law of motion, which was the external force is equals to the change in momentum divided by the time for such a particular motion. So we know that impulse is equals to change in momentum. Because we have F and T, we just substitute the values. So the force is 1000 newton, so F is 1000 newton, multiplied by the time for this particular motion or journey, which is 3 seconds. So 1000 times 3 seconds should be equal to the change in momentum. We know that change in momentum means the final momentum subtracted from the initial momentum. So the final momentum is mv, that is the mass of the body, times the final velocity of that particular body, which we are required to find. So we shall have the mass of the body is 1000 kilogram, therefore we have 1000 multiplied by the final velocity v. Then we subtract the initial momentum, which is the mass of the body multiplied by the initial velocity of that particular body. But because we are told that a truck of mass 2000 kilograms starts from rest, that means the initial velocity of that particular truck was 0 meters per second. Therefore u is 0. Therefore we shall have mass, which is 2000 multiplied by 0. So that means the whole of this quantity, that is negative 2000 times 0, we shall obtain 0. Therefore 1000 times 3, we shall get 3000. Of course that is Newton second, being equal to 2000 V minus 0. But we know that whenever you add or you subtract 0 from a given value, you will just get that particular value. Therefore we have 3000 being equal to 2000 V. If I make V the subject of the formula, I'll just divide both sides by 2000 so that I remain with V on the other side. So V alone shall be equal to 3000 divided by 2000, which shall yield 1.5. So of course this is the final velocity. Therefore, because all quantities we were computing them when they were in their respective SI units, it means that if we also find the unknown, that is the velocity, it must be in its respective SI units. Therefore the speed or the velocity, the final velocity, shall be 1.5 meters per second. Question 2 reads that a ball of mass 35 grams traveling horizontally at 20 meters per second strikes a wall at right angles and rebounds with a speed of 16 meters per second. We are required to find the impulse exerted on the ball, the impact exerted on the ball. Then we are told that we choose the direction in which the ball rebounds as positive. So remember, in this case, we are told that a ball of mass 35 grams is traveling horizontally at 20 meters per second. Then it strikes a wall at right angles. So assuming this is my wall, then the ball comes initially, it strikes the wall. Then we are told that after striking the wall at right angle, that is at an angle of 90, you can see that my angle here is 90. That is the angle between the line that represents how the ball is traveling and my wall. The angle between them is 90 degrees, or they are perpendicular, and rebounds with a speed of 16 meters per second. So after the ball hits this particular wall, it rebounds, or it moves to the opposite direction at the velocity of 16 meters per second. Then we are told by the question to choose the direction in which the ball rebounds as positive. So if we choose this particular direction in which the ball rebounds after hitting this particular wall, or the direction in which the ball bounces after hitting this particular wall. So if we are told that this direction is positive, then automatically the direction that the ball is moving towards that particular wall must be negative. Yeah, if this direction is, if the direction from the wall towards the right hand side is positive, automatically the direction from the right hand side towards that particular wall, it must be negative. It must be negative, because we are considering the directions, because remember here we are talking of velocities, and a velocity is a vector quantity. Therefore we have to put into consideration the aspects of both its magnitude and direction. So we are asked to find the impulse exerted on the ball. So we know that impulse is equals to the change in momentum, and we know that change in momentum means the final momentum subtracted from that is the initial momentum subtracted from the final momentum. And the momentum, we said, is the product of mass and the velocity of that particular body. So because velocity is a vector quantity, therefore you must consider the directions of those particular objects. If you are told maybe to assume that the direction in which the ball hits the wall is positive, automatically the direction in which the ball bounces from the wall towards the right hand side, in that case, would be negative. So you have to consider the directions that you have been provided by the question. So the impulse is equals change in momentum, which is mv minus mu. So the mass of the body, we are told that a ball of mass 35 grams, but we know that the SI unit for mass is kilogram. Therefore we also know that 1000 grams is equals to 1 kilogram. So what about 35 grams? So that should be 35 grams divided by 1000 gram multiplied by 1 kilogram. That is, to convert 35 grams into kilogram, we simply divide by 1000. Then we multiply by the final velocity, because the velocity at which that particular ball hits the wall, that is before it bounces back, that is our initial velocity. Then the ball strikes a wall at right angles and rebounds with a velocity, or with a speed of 16 meters per second. So it bounces back, so automatically this is our final velocity. Then we are told to choose the direction in which the ball rebounds to be positive. So this is positive 16 as our final velocity v, because it is in the positive direction. Therefore our final velocity is positive, because we have been told by the question to take that direction as positive. Therefore the final velocity is 16, then minus the mass of the body. Remember, mass is constant everywhere, that's why it is not changing. So the mass of the ball is still 35 grams. So to convert into kilogram, we just divide by 1000. Then we multiply by the initial velocity of that particular body. So because we are told that the final velocity, or the velocity in which the ball moves after bouncing from the wall, is positive, that means the velocity of the ball approaching the wall must be negative. That's why our initial velocity u shall be negative 20 meters per second, because the direction from the ball towards that particular wall is negative, simply because we are told that the direction from the wall towards the right hand side is positive. So automatically this other direction becomes negative. And because we are talking of velocities, and velocities are vector quantities, we have to add a negative here so that it indicates the negativity in the direction of that particular velocity. Therefore, the initial velocity shall be negative 20 meters per second. Negative meaning that it is moving in the opposite direction. So the negative, so the final velocity shall be negative 20 meters per second. Then 35 over 1000 multiplied by 16, you'll obtain 0.56. Then negative 35 over 1000 multiplied by negative 20, you'll obtain, remember, negative and negative shall give you a positive, so you'll obtain positive 0.7. Then 0.56 added to 0.7, you'll obtain 1.26 Newton second. So the most important point to note here is the directions in which those particular quantities or that particular ball is moving. So if you are given one of the directions as positive, then the ball, after bounding back, it moves in the negative, in the opposite direction, then the other direction must be negative, and vice versa. Next, we look at another example which reads that the valve of a gas cylinder containing 15 kilogram of compressed gas is opened and the cylinder emptied in 1 hour 20 minutes. If the gas issues from the exit nozzle with a velocity of an average velocity of 30 meters per second, find the force exerted on the cylinder. The force exerted on the cylinder. As usual, we just obtain the values, or we highlight the values that you have been provided by the question. So you are told that the valve of a gas cylinder containing 15 kilogram of compressed gas, so that is the mass of the gas is 15 kilogram, is opened and the cylinder emptied in 1 hour 20 minutes. So because this is time, we know that the SI unit of time is seconds. That means we have to convert the hours into seconds. We also convert 20 minutes into seconds, so that we are only dealing with the SI units. So we know that 1 hour is equals to 3600 seconds. What about 1 hour? So that shall be 1 hour over 1 hour multiplied by 3600 seconds. Then we know that we know that 60 seconds is equals to 1 minute. What about 20 minutes? So we shall have 20 minutes over 1 minute multiplied by 60 seconds. That is to convert them into seconds. So 3600 added to 2 times 6, we get 12. That is 1200 seconds. So you take 3600 added to 1200 seconds, you'll obtain 4800 seconds as the time for this particular activity to take place. Then we are told that if the gas issues from the exit nozzle with an average velocity of 30 meters per second, so that is our final velocity of that particular gas is 30 meters per second. Then we are being told that if the gas issues from the exit nozzle with an average velocity of this, then we are told that initially the valve of a gas cylinder containing 15 kilogram of compressed gas is opened. So if this gas is being opened, it means initially it was enclosed within that particular gas cylinder. So if the gas is enclosed, it means that initially the velocity of the gas was 0, because if it was enclosed, it was not moving, or it was not exiting at any given point. So that means the resultant initial velocity of that particular gas which was enclosed within that particular gas cylinder, it was 0. So because it was enclosed, so the initial velocity of the gas is 0, but the final velocity after it has been opened, it exits through the nozzle, therefore its final velocity is 30 meters per second. Then we are required to find the force exerted on the cylinder, so F is our unknown. Then you just look for an appropriate formula that utilizes all these values that you have been given and the value that you are being asked to find. So a formula that utilizes mass, time, initial velocity, final velocity, and F, of course, is a formula that we derived from the Newton's second law of motion, which was the resultant external force F is equals to change in momentum divided by the time taken for that particular activity to take place, of course, with each and every quantity in its respective SI units. So the mass of the gas was 15 kilograms, so we shall take 15 multiplied by the final velocity of that particular gas, it was exiting at 30 meters per second. Therefore, final velocity is 30. Then we subtract the mass of the cylinder, that is the gas, is still 15 kilogram, multiplied by the initial velocity of the gas, because the gas was initially enclosed within a container, therefore its initial velocity is 0. So 15 multiplied by 0, then divided by the total time taken for the gas to exit. It was 4,800 seconds. So of course 15 by 0, you'll obtain 0. 15 multiplied by 30, then you divide by 4,800, you'll obtain 0.09375 newtons as the force that was exerted on the gas cylinder in order to allow that particular gas to exit within the specified time of 4,800 seconds. Then I have an exercise here that I recommend you should try at your own free time, so that you gauge whether you have understood the examples that you have just dealt with. And of course, if you have any challenges concerning the exercise that I've provided here, just be free to drop a comment specifying maybe the specific question that you need help in. And of course, I'm here to try and help where possible. So we've come to the end of our class today, but we need to discuss the quote of the day. The quote of the day stated that small steps in the right direction can turn out to be the biggest step in your life. So the quote is just encouraging those of us who are on the journey to their destiny to keep moving. Yeah, the quote is encouraging us not to give up while we are in the process of pursuing our destiny or our purpose in life. The quote is also reminding us to focus our efforts on the process and not on the results, because good results can only be achieved if the process is well done. Yeah, learn to respect the process. Do not expect everything to blossom faster, or do not expect quick results. Everything takes time, provided you stay persistent and you stay consistent. And lastly, recall that your destiny can never be taken away by anyone. Instead, it can only be delayed by circumstances. Yeah, so don't lose hope. Keep the faith, keep the fire burning, and one day, one time, you will achieve the desires of your heart. Thank you very much for accompanying me until the end of this particular lesson. I do not take it for granted. In case you are new to the channel, kindly hit the subscription button so that whenever I upload a new video, you'll get a notification. Also turn on the notification bell. Then in case you know anyone that you honestly think could benefit from this content, kindly refer them to this channel, which is Kind Tuition Academy. Until next time, thank you very much.